Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We are in the Billy Meyer case today. I'm going to pick up on page 198 of the Might of Thoughts, something I read today that I think is very important and has stuck with me all day. It says, the human being is always attracted by and brings to fruition that which he or she consciously or secretly loves and strives for. Thus, that which comes into his or her hands is always the precise product of that which his or her own thoughts create. In this form, he or she always receives that which he or she actually earns, no more and no less. This is I think of the situations where people have circumstances that have come into their life that are very difficult, and you just wonder about that. But the part that was particularly interesting to me, it says the human being is always attracted by and brings to fruition that which he or she consciously or secretly loves and strives for. So, if we truly desire something and we strive for it, then we will bring that forth in our life. And it also says he or she consciously or secretly loves. So I think we also unconsciously bring things into our life that maybe we desire in some subconscious way that we may or may not be completely aware of. There is an article, it's called Love Letter 27, and I quote from bits and pieces of that writing as well. And I wanted to read a little bit of that today. In the Figu material, love is discussed a lot. However, it becomes clear that the love that they talk about is not romantic love, and that love can be either affective, or effective. And affective love is a more romantic style of love, and it's very transient in nature. It comes and goes. It rises to great heights and then plummets to great depths, leading often to despair. Now, there's another kind of love. It's called effective love, and this is based on our innermost being and is in no ways transient and can never transpire. Effective love is also the same kind of love that creation has. Now, it says in these writings that love is the highest principle in creation. And through it, everything exists in absolute logic. So without the love of creation, nothing would have ever come into existence. Let me reaffirm that with this little passage that says, no life is able to exist without love and without the light of truth. However, no light is able to exist without love and truth, and no truth is able to exist without light and love. When Billy was a young boy, and I've talked about this, of course, many times, he crawled out that lower window in his bedroom and looked up at a beautiful starry sky and said, I see the light which the stars emit, but there's another light, an invisible light, which he called the love of creation. So there's this love of creation, and in this Figu Love Letter 27, it says the love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. And the individual should therefore be aware that he exists only through the love of creation, and that he carries this love within himself. And the creation created everything in love and logic and put the same love in all its creatures so that life itself is love. Again, we're not talking about romantic love at all, although this is a very poetic kind of writing. We're talking about something that radiates from the central intelligence of this universe, that this love radiates from the very center of creation. And creation is the universal consciousness. It's a neutral, positive intelligence. It's called a Wesenheiten in the German. It has much in common with water. If you think of the Pacific Ocean, it evolves along a predetermined pattern. It doesn't really have a personality so much like a human being. It radiates love, and the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. So creation generates, it creates things as expression of its love. And every tiny plant and every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in love, even though creation isn't perfect. It's not a God. It's not a heavenly Father. It's not perfect. And there are imperfections in creation, and I would say that the struggle that goes on might be one of those imperfections, one animal eating another, yet all of them programmed in love. It's a very kind of a contradictory from our human perspective. In some ways, you can see, for example, cats and dogs and animals. I saw a very interesting YouTube video where this fox runs across the ice at these Russian fishermen who then feed the fox, And there's this interesting, we might call it love, between these two creatures. But then the fox, of course, will have to kill a little rabbit or something along that lines in order to continue to survive. So, and I see that in my cats, for example. They have great affection for one another and for me, and they're very loving, but they'll kill a mouse in a second. So it's this strange paradox that we live in. Nature is in a very, very interesting balance. And I think really what it comes down to is we human beings are the top of the food chain, and we are the caretakers of the planet. And again, the creation is not a God, because it will allow us to destroy this planet and wipe out all the life on it. And we will if we continue in the pattern of overpopulation that we have been living in. Let me continue here in this little bit about Love Letter 27, that the love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. The individual should therefore be aware that he exists only through the love of creation, and he carries that love within himself. And that creation created everything in love and logic and put the same love in all its creatures so that life itself is love. Even if living in the world often seems to consist only of conflict and drudgery, this fact does not change. In our world, we live on a planet that hasn't learned the creational natural laws. So as overpopulation expands, we see more and more creation destroyed, more of the animals die because of our freeways and highways, and this is a pattern that's been going on. And this is addressed in this next passage to a degree. It says, life has become primarily a heavy and tough battle only because people have turned away from creation and have lost knowledge of its existence. And we live in a society that has no understanding of the radiating love of creation. And we do not have this great respect for life that we should have. And we kind of live on a we could call it a rat race for monetary gain, because we have to do that to survive. It's a strange situation that we live in. Let me continue. In undiminished size, however, creation lets its love become apparent nevertheless through its creations. And the person must only be willing to see and recognize this love, and he will begin to feel it. If he opens to the love of creation and he allows it to flow into himself, he becomes filled with respectful gratitude and great joy. Now this is, again, I want to take this back to the Might of Thoughts, because it says here that the human being is always attracted by and brings to fruition that which he consciously or secretly loves and strives for. So never underestimate the power of your thinking, because we all go through this time of, I don't know if it's despair or discouragement or what I want to call it, but if you can stay neutral and just keep plugging away at whatever your goal is, stay neutral in your thinking and keep plugging away. It says it right here. Thus, that which comes into his hands is always the precise product of that which is his or her own thoughts create. In this form, he or she always receives that which he or she actually earns, no more and no less. So one of the things we have to keep in mind is that idleness is not a good thing. And let me read this. It says, in idleness, only that which is unproductive, uncreative, and destructive arises. However, with assiduousness, everything progresses. Ideal, constructive, and successful, and so forth arises. So, it's very interesting. One of the things that Colonel Wendell Stevens said when he was over visiting Billy is that Billy was always busy. And if you want to talk to Billy, you have to go with him somewhere because he's doing something. And that's the nature of striving. And that's one of the creational natural laws. And in the Meyer material, anyway, it says there are basically three laws. There are more than three, but three fundamental laws that you want to kind of live your life by. And the first of it is love. And that's effective love. That's a love that's not romantic in nature. So the goal is to live and help live. So operate in love towards your fellow man, to plants and animals. And if you can do those three groups, it will help very much. The second creational natural law is striving, and that's continually working, continually plugging away, continually being focused, continually working, whether it's your work in your day job or your work in your hobbies. And you'll find out, at least what I've found out, as I continued to strive in my quote-unquote hobbies, they started to produce a kind of income. It's a very strange thing. So if you have hobbies that you stick with and you are consistent with over the years, they will also, the difference between your hobbies and your work will kind of blend together. It's a weird thing that takes place. And it's just something I've noticed over the years. So striving has interesting effects if you stick with it over the long period of time. And this is a creational natural law, striving. The third law that the Meyer information talks about is neutral positive thinking. And if you strive and you lose your neutral positive thinking, your striving becomes ineffective. If you're trying to operate in love and you lose your neutral positive thinking, that activity will fall apart. So these areas, they overlap. So these are important things to keep in mind. Let me continue here. Each smallest plant, each ever so tiny animal was created in love by creation. Each creation exists according to the same law of love. So all the plants, and I suggest that people plant plants and take care of the plants in and around their house. They will provide great feedback to you in terms of spirituality. If you will, by your nature, appreciate plants more and more if you stick with this material. And every tiny plant and every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in love and was created in love by creation. So if you're planting plants, you're working right along with creation. And plants are very important for your frame of mind. All life is in the absolute perfection, which it should be through the love of creation. And except for humans, every life form lives exactly by this creation's plan. Do you know that animals and plants really don't function in free will the way we do? They're always going to operate, no matter what decisions they make, and I think they do make decisions, they will be within the framework of creation's plan. Now, when man is involved with animals, that's when the life of animals goes outside creation's plan. And we can bring great misery to the animal world because of our lack of understanding of creation. Let me continue here. Life is in absolute perfection, that which it should be, through the love of creation. And except for humans, every life form lives exactly by creation's plan. Only humans have turned away from love. That's a big statement. Plants and animals cannot and do not turn away from love. They may follow instincts to hunt another animal to eat, but they never do it outside of creation's plan. Even though there's conflicts between animals, for example, lions and hyenas, as a part of surviving, they always function according to instinct, which is creation's plan. And I think we have within us a guiding force as human beings that can operate much like instinct. Sannyasi said, in terms of creations, he said, it will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong if you've learned to pay attention to it. And she's talking about your spirit form. So your spirit form will let you know if your thinking is right or wrong if you've learned to pay attention to it. It records everything that you do, all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, and that's what it's doing during our material lifetime. It's just gathering information, and it also impulses your material consciousness. So we have this spiritual consciousness, which is really a fragment of the universal consciousness. And I talked about the law of love, which is the highest form of love. It's effective love. I talked about the fundamental law of all evolution, which is striving. And I mentioned the bipolar structure of everything that exists, the positive and the negative. So creation operates under these laws. And your life goes much better as long as you're functioning within these laws. Our creation, our universe, has an expansion phase and a contraction phase. The expansion phase lasts 155.5 trillion years, And during that time, it continues to create spirit forms. There's an interesting passage in the Decalogue, which I don't really completely understand what this is saying, but I'm sure there's a lot of information there. It says the creation is the being and the non-being of life. So perhaps life has two aspects to it, being and non-being. It is the most immense and massive spiritual energy in the universe. It is spirit in its purest form, and it is immeasurable in its wisdom. And there is something called the creational spiritual energy, which is interweaving throughout the whole universe. The entire universe is laced with this energy, and it has an intelligence of its own. And we shouldn't think of this intelligence as an intelligence like human beings have, because it's not. This intelligence brings forth life forms, matter. Every spirit, all the spirit energy is there to enliven spirit life forms like plants and animals, even at the smallest level like microbes and bacteria and viruses. Also, this spirit energy is in sand and rocks and water, and it stays in the body after our death. It remains for about 3 hours in our bodies. So that's when you can do organ donation, while that spirit energy is there. So this is one of the secrets of creation. It's a fascinating thing. Now, we have the spirit form that is our real self. I think I say this, it's kind of like the real you. It never dies. The spirit form comes in the body of a child 21 days after the sperm follows, or the sperm fertilizes the egg. That is when the spirit form comes into the fetus. And the fetus comes alive and its body, its heart starts to beat. I just want to say hello to Always Strive in the chat room, which is a great name to have. Always Strive. Yeah, and that principle of striving is new to me. I didn't know that until like a year or two ago. But I mean, I've always tried to work hard, but I didn't realize I was following nature's plan when I do that. And it's really funny, if you really learn to be neutral positive and you maintain your neutral positive, striving will not be that hard or difficult of a thing, even though you work a lot and you put in long hours and you get tired and things like that. But it actually has kind of an enjoyment with it. It's really hard to quite put into words. There is a book called The Way to Live, which I recommend if you get a chance, try to get that book. You can get it from theyfly.com, Michael Horn's site. It's a very, very good book. It is different than the mind of thoughts. It's different than the psyche. I wanted to talk about something I had seen in my notes that's in this book that's on page 406. So you get the advantage of the people that listen to this show in archives, which is the vast majority, are people who get an advantage. And what I'm saying is that is you get to learn things before you even read the book. So on page 406 of The Way to Live, it says, at the latest, the knowledge about the earlier life, that is to say, about the earlier existence, ceases to exist at the time of rebirth. Now, it does say, and I think it's Contact Report 6, when we get to the fifth stage of evolution, it's called the time of recognitions, where we really start to remember these things. But why is this so? Why do we not right now remember these previous lives? With a rebirth, there arises a completely new personality, which no longer has one iota to do with anything of the earlier life. The new personality must lead a new life on its own, with its own new thoughts, feelings, ideas, and emotions, and so forth. In order to evolve, as is pre-given through the creational laws and recommendations. Memories of the earlier life, however, would influence the new personality in such a way that a devastating confusion would come about, which would impair the material consciousness to the point of insanity. Memories of earlier lives are therefore seriously burdening to the consciousness and thereby prevent evolution. I think that is so true. I think I have even memories now which could be a burden to evolution. However, this applies not only to memories which relate to the earlier life or several earlier lives, rather it also applies to everyday life. Also in this, it is given through creational causal coordination that everything which flows into the past from the future, that is to say, from the present, is quickly forgotten. Were that not the case, then the consciousness as well as the memory would be so overburdened and overtaxed that the result would very quickly be a complete breakdown. You know, man, I tell you what, this is so true. There are things which have happened, like for example in my life, that it's best just for me not to remember because it just brings back things that are best left alone. I mean, we have to learn to just do the best we can, and that's all we can do. We can, and we're gonna make mistakes, and we're gonna lose people, and we're gonna lose animals, and we have to let these things go. It's very challenging sometimes, but so that does not happen. One has the forgetting, however, increasingly abates the higher the human being evolves. From that, it can be gleaned that the Earth human still lives in a very low state of consciousness-based and spiritual evolution. And there are only extremely few who already are above that and have some more memories at their disposal than is usually the case with the Earth human being of the Earth. However, these exceptions are so few that they are barely worth mentioning. Thus, it will still be many centuries and even millennia before the human being's state of consciousness is evolved, so evolved that he or she can acquire greater quotients of memory, which guarantee him/more memories both in everyday life as well as in regard to earlier lives. So, thousands of years from now, probably even longer, we will eventually gain the ability to clearly recall these previous life memories. Now, it does happen. Occasionally, people do, particularly kids, remember clearly their previous lives, what their address was. There was one little boy, and it wasn't genetic memory because he had no one in his family who was a pilot in World War II. But he remembered clearly being on a carrier in World War II, and he flew a Corsair, and he talked, he was 4 years old, and he was talking about the tires getting flat because the Corsair was a very heavy plane, and it would often have blowouts of its tires when it would land. He was shot down by anti-aircraft fire. He remembered the names of the other pilots that he flew with. He remembered the name of the aircraft carrier called the Potomac Bay. It's a very, very interesting case. And he met these men who were still alive, by the way. So he had reincarnated so quickly that his friends that he flew with were still alive. And that's one of the side effects of overpopulation, is that we're coming back way too quickly. And it means our spirit forms are not completely prepared for the next life. And there are bad side effects with that. Let me continue. To have no memories of an early life in no ways means that one has not already lived such lives in manifold form. Rather, it solely means that one is far from being able to cope with the memories of earlier lives. Once one views and considers one's everyday life, then one recognizes that its memories also increasingly fade the older one becomes, whereby naturally exceptions can always arise for certain occurrences and so forth. But the rule is that experiences of the childhood, or experiences of yesterday, or just from an hour ago, also disappear from the memory and become increasingly weak. Even though one's living experience of that was extremely vivid or quite stirring, it then as soon appears as if nothing had ever happened. And when, in this wise, the human being is often already very quickly no longer able to remember any particular occurrences, feelings, experiences, thoughts, words, ideas, action, deeds, and emotions, and so forth, how can one then even assume that it is completely natural, easy, and normal to remember any particular things which in the last or any of the earlier life influenced this one? Now, this is very important. And remember this. The forgetting is a protection for the consciousness so that the personality can develop freely and clearly in the frame prescribed by the creational laws and recommendation. Spared from the forgetting are only the attained truthfully knowledge and the effective truth, the love, the joy, the harmony, the equalisedness, and the wisdom, as well as the practical and living experience of these values, which not only the consciousness evolutively profits, rather also the spirit. But the human being must also do something for this, that he or she has to always consciously be assiduous in all things. However, if he or she does not follow this rule, then in the course of time, these values are also forgotten. So the values that you've learned from studying this material, you can forget, which is not good. And this can cause a stagnation in the evolution manifest. I think I've experienced that before, which can only be broken through with new efforts of striving and knowledge and truth and so forth. This is a fascinating book. I really recommend it. It's called The Way to Live. There are parts of it that you will read that you will not get the first time through. The book that I really intended to focus on today, that I'm really reading right now, is called The Mind of Thoughts. This book is so much that is so much true. One of the things in terms of general terms that really have been particularly jumping out at me lately is the part that talks about, and this is page 192, that talks about how important it is to have visionaries and dreamers and imaginative people. And this is what continues the evolution of society. So that's one of the things I've been kind of focusing on, is trying to rekindle that in myself, but not in a productive way. I think it can be unproductive, but it's very important. Let me read what it says. Had the visionaries, dreamers, and imaginative ones not lived, humanity would never have reached its current state of evolution. and would have already passed away long ago. Dreamers, enthusiasts, ruminators, visionaries, and those with a gift for fantasy are therefore the real bringers of progress, because they are humanly truly creative and constructive thinkers. It is they who create architecture, designs, poetry, compositions, paintings, prophecy, and philosophy, literature, inventions, work of sculpture, and many other things. They bring them to humanity, which thereby profits in every regard, and thereby becomes progressives. Human beings who know how to nurture beautiful, good, positive, and progressive visions, dreaming, and fantasies live with elevated ideas, which they are one day able to bring to fruition by means of the might of their thoughts. That book is very, very important. That book teaches objectivity about evaluating your own thoughts. One of the hard things, I think, for a lot of people is to recognize early on that they're entertaining a thought which is self-destructive. And one of the things I try to do now and again is memorize certain passages from these books, and it takes a while to really get them ingrained into your memory. But one of them says something to the effect that the human who does not overcome his weaknesses and does not free himself from negative and destructive thoughts remains weak, miserable, and wretched. So I always try to put that back into my face when I'm entertaining thoughts that are not good. Let me pick back up in the Way to Live book on page 418. Maybe I'll turn there as well. The false I. We all have a false I. You've got the real you. You've got the false you. It's one thing the Meyer material talks about. The inner I, the real you, is related to creation. It's a neutral, positive individual that is in line with the creational natural laws. It's the part of you and your personality that are compliant to your spiritual consciousness. Well, you have a false I. And this false I attempts to complicate things. And it denies everything. Because it knows very precisely that it is fundamentally endangered. Now, let me repeat that. Your false I is fundamentally endangered by your spiritual growth. The false I, it will attempt to complicate everything, deny everything, because it knows precisely that it is fundamentally endangered by knowledge, truth, and evolution. All of the I's inhibiting attempts to sabotage the way of evolution are senseless and negating in spite of all the efforts. So you have your own internal struggle. You have two personalities. You have two I's. And they are locked in a struggle. Because the false I evidently kind of goes away the more we evolve. And let me cover this in a little more detail on page 418 here. Well, let me start before then. I'll start here on page 416. The human being's I is very mighty and exercises a tyranny characterized by Gewaltsamkeit. That is like brutality beyond brutality. I mean, your false I, my false I, is very negative. One thing that came to my mind when I was reading that is I think the elite, people that have risen to great power and wealth on the earth right now, are, I think, possibly functioning under their false I. Let me continue. The human being's eye is very mighty and exercises a tyranny characterized by Gewaltsamkeit. It's another German word there. This is brutality beyond brutality. That's not a good definition. We'll have to come back to that someday. Which can only be ended by one going the way of effective evolution. But the eye's richness of imagination is almost inexhaustible. For which reason one can step off the efforts and wishes to free oneself from its tyrannical nature. So your false eye puts you in a tyranny. It takes away your freedom. Have you ever experienced that? Think about it. It can circumvent and distort the efforts and wishes as desired. It is, if the necessary care is not applied and the truth of all truth is not acknowledged and helpfully enlisted, the truth of the teaching of the effective evolution and creational moments is simple and extremely clear. But it stipulates that everything is recognized and understood and is correctly used. However, the self-willed and tyrannical eye is very mighty as soon as the simple and clear truth begins to work in the human being and stirs and moves him or her. So again, we have a struggle with the false eye and the real inner you. The eye attempts to complicate and deny everything because it knows very precisely that it is fundamentally endangered by knowledge, truth, and evolution. All of the eye's inhibiting attempts to sabotage the way of evolution are senseless and negating in spite all of its efforts. If one continues to go the way of the realization of the positive, whereby the practice of meditation is a very great help, and that's something I'm neglecting again, through which it slowly recognizes how many inner matters of the eye need changing in evolution. And that's one thing I've noticed about the Might of Thoughts book. It's helped me to objectively evaluate my own self and say, well, there's something that I need to change right there. That's something I need to work on. And it has also recognized how one has let oneself be duped up to this point by the eye's false hopes and empty promises. Consequently, also, one's own true personality was not recognized. So again, this is this struggle that goes back and forth. Your false eye, I think it's related to our appetites. And if you're functioning under, we talk about negative thinking and the repeating patterns of negative thinking and how they produce synapses in the brain, which are pathways which become deeply ingrained. And then when you start down the path of negative thinking, it goes in a cycle that you have a hard time breaking. Well, this is part of the interplay of the false eye. And the false eye takes control of your brain when you start to rotate in the negative thinking, which happens unconsciously until you realize, oh, wow, I'm making myself miserable with these thoughts. I have to stop thinking these thoughts. So, let me continue here. So, and when you're functioning under the false eye in this cyclical thinking, that's not your true personality. Let me continue. The cognition brings to light not only that which is false and empty, rather also the positive values, which has as a consequence an effective self-cognition, from which everything positive can be used for self-realization. Through this process, one also understands that, as a rule, hope, that's a good thing to hear about, hope describes a factor which bears with it an extremely negative value and only contains something positive in exceptional cases. Indeed, only when the form of the hope is built upon effective knowledge. So there's two kinds of hope here. There's a kind that's not good at all, and there's a kind that's built on effective knowledge, which is really good. However, if the hope is not based on knowledge, then it has the form of an uncertain expectation, which is nourished by doubts and contradictions, and so forth, and in which fear as well as anxiety will lodge themselves. However, hope, fear, and anxiety are the greatest enemies of the inner peace as well as of the real self-cognition and self-realization. Sufficient hopes, which are not built upon effective knowledge, call forth anxiety and bitterness. So if you have hope, make sure it's not false hope, because that will lead you down a real negative path. But fear and anxiety also paralyze the actual inner nature and hold it prisoner in the false identity as if in a narrow cell. You know, it's so funny. If you can just be neutral. So if you're experiencing anxiety and bitterness and all this drama, ask yourself, am I neutral right now? Am I being neutral? No. So just neutralize those negative feelings. Neutralize them. Get rid of them. They're not important. They're not good. They don't help you. But the false identity is the self-created I through which the essential inner and creation-given I is oppressed in the greatest part of its inner nature. That's so true, man. I think people, they live a life of their inner natures being suppressed by the false I. And that's truly a tyranny. That's a self-created tyranny, for which reason it cannot become free without making conscious effort for all of that. And as long as that does not happen, the self-created I dictatorially holds prisoner the real inner I and the consciousness. The real inner I is the prisoner of the self-created I. So your real inner I is the real you. It's related to your spiritual consciousness. It's connected with creation. The false I is the tyrannical aspect of your own nature that runs out of control. So if your thoughts have run out of control and you're in over your head and you're stuck, one of the things you can do is go back to a moment of gladness. And this is mentioned on page 328 in the Way to Live book. And one may simply contemplate a moment of gladness. I had a moment of gladness today out in the sun. And it's interesting how good thinking at previous points can build onto things. And I've done some good thinking in terms of having the right furniture that I can move around outside and kind of lay down and on this cot-like thing and just looking out in the backyard and just I've really got a good spot here. I'm really quite blessed to be in nature like this and to be out there with my cats. So that was my moment of gladness. That's another moment of gladness. So you need to collect these moments of gladnesses in your memory and think about them and contemplate them and learn to visualize these moments of gladness. Because the moments of gladness can correct your thinking when they've gone astray. Let me read what Billy's written here. It says, and one may simply contemplate a moment of gladness, which perhaps simply arises because one sees the snowflakes floating down or a sunbeam which mysteriously fingers through the forest. But it can also be a flower on the edge of a path or a bird and its twittering which pleases the consciousness. These are the moments of peace, of love, of the happiness and of the equalisedness and harmony, as well as of the reflection and insight. These are the moments which work deep into the inner part of the consciousness and make one's feelings tingle and please the psyche. And these moments and their distinguishing characteristics must be retained so that they constantly remain in one's memory. I wish I was better at retaining those moments, because I know I've had a lot in my life, but they tend to go the way of many things, of these memories. So try to hold on to those moments of gladness in your life and clarify them and repeat them. I've got to do better at that too. Let me continue here in The Way to Live book. And this is on page 328 again. It says, but the mass of the modern human beings produce no frame or context in which the experiencing of the true nature of the consciousness could be understood. Quite the contrary. Everything is done so that the consciousness's state of equalizedness is suppressed and blocked, so that it cannot cause any impulsations in the thinking, in the feeling, and emotions, and in the psyche, which would give cause for joy and feelings of happiness. So we are in a society which is really mostly numbing itself, and that's an unfortunate thing, very much so, because we need to be a society that is waking up. But evolution always pushes forward, and we will continue to evolve as a society, and that's certainly one of the things that is true. And it's interesting how I think we're going to look at history so much differently. I've stumbled across some really interesting movies on Hitler, and I think he was a much different person than what he's been painted to be. And I think he was probably the enemy of the wealthy elite, which I think the wealthy elite in many ways, and this is my own stuff to a degree. I mean, Billy does confirm this to a degree. There's, in the Goblet of Truth, there's a bit on this as well. But there's also aspects of quote-unquote conspiracy theory that Billy does say is wrong. So I got to be balanced in that sense. So I'm probably a little bit more of a conspiracy theorist in a lot of ways than the Meyer material is. And one of the things that the Goblet of Truth talks about is the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. And hopefully no one will be offended by this, but one of the things that Meyer material talks about is the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. And in the Goblet of Truth, Billy says, in the Christian world, the blame for this, and he's talking about some of the negative things in history, lies squarely and fairly at the door of the Roman Catholic Church. Christianity, as a monotheistic and strictly autocratically oriented religion, is guilty of developing completely new evil and askertet, it's another German word, directions of thoughts and forms of state after the fall of the despotic Roman Empire, which spread over the earth and under which all human beings are suffering in the new times. So and it goes on to say and talk about what's called a consciousness conditioned tyranny is in place on the earth right now. And this tyranny is this consciousness conditioned tyranny is, I think, tied into the media. And I was talking about Hitler earlier. For example, I'll give you some of the things that have been falsely painted about Hitler. It's never explained why the Germans went into Poland and why they invaded Poland. The reason they did that is the Poles were killing thousands and thousands of Germans which were living in Poland at that time. They were just murdering them. I don't know what their motivation for doing that was. But it's one of these things that's been covered up. So Hitler went into Poland, and he did invade Poland. And then shortly after that, he sent messages to Winston Churchill and said, hey, I am not, how did he put it? He said that he wanted peace. Hitler sent on 6 or 7 different occasions to Winston Churchill, he tried to establish a peace. This is when he was winning the war. He didn't do this to save his butt, because shortly after that, he invaded France, and he took over France. But he told him, look, I want peace, and if we can come to a peace agreement, this war can end. But Winston Churchill would have nothing to do with that. Now, I'm not trying to say Hitler was all a bed of roses, but what I'm trying to say is that we haven't got the real story yet of history. And one of the things that has happened is we're living in this consciousness conditioned tyranny that started in Roman times and has worked through the Inquisition. Remember the Inquisition, which killed millions of people, I think? One of the punishments of the Inquisition was what they called the auto de fe, where condemned heretics were burned at the stake. Some estimate in the Spanish Inquisition that almost 32,000 people were burned at the stake by the religious, by the Holy Romans. This is what history, and maybe we'll talk a little more about history in some of the coming shows. Hopefully, I will free up, and I do have, I think this week we've got Stuart Swerdlow coming on May 10th. So I actually have a guest, but it was a guest that I made last month. I've been working so many hours, and I just haven't. Plus, I've had guitar events popping up all over the place. But anyway, you've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. I hope you've enjoyed this show. I enjoyed bringing it to you. Please continue to study the Meyer material. Pass this information on. It's our future hope. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you next time. Good night.